Hi there, welcome to Bourbon Turntable. This is the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. Tonight, I have as my returning guest, Erik Wolfe of Stoll Wolfe Distillery in Lititz, Pennsylvania. Erik has a great story in how his distillery came about, in the great things that they have done to resurrect the Rosen Rye grain, and of course, his relationship with the legendary Dick Stoll. But before we get into that, I want to tell you about Bar Cart Co-op. Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of friends who produce content for the whiskey enthusiast, folks like you. Shows like Distillers Talk with Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. Alan and Christy will talk with distillers from across the country and around the world about anything and everything in terms of distillation. Alan also has a couple more shows you should check out. One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. And If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything. My Whiskey Den with Pat and Mike and Mitch every Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. Don't miss it. They have some wonderful guests. They have some cool tastings. And it's always fun to hang out with the folks that are just chilling in the chat. Whiskey in My Wedding Ring is from David Levine. David has a fantastic podcast where he will interview distillers, and he also has a blog where he posts very useful and very spot-on reviews. As for our show, if you're watching us right now on YouTube, would love it if you would subscribe. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, you can subscribe there as well. It takes just a couple of seconds, and I promise it is not painful at all. All right, so let's go ahead and talk with Erik Wolfe in part one of my conversation with him. Hi there, welcome to Bourbon Turntable. This is the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. And we have a friend back tonight, Mr. Erik Wolfe. Erik, welcome back to Bourbon Turntable.
Thanks so much for having us on. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk.
Yeah, I know we've had you on this show before, and I think we did a show with you and Alan on the Bar Cart label where we were talking about some of the projects and stuff that you guys are working on. So maybe we'll get a refresher on that from you later on.
Oh, I look forward to talking about it.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, and I think you can kind of use this as a way to talk about the Stoll Wolfe origin story and the values of the distillery, and that is right on top of your on top of the name on your label. It says "United by Purpose Across Time." So, talk a little bit about what that means to you, to the distillery, and what that has to do with creating the distillery and where you are today.
Sure. No, that's a great question. Well, actually, that's just some clever marketing that some guy came up. No, totally kidding. That should be the blurb for the show right there, just the quote for it. No, well, and just to take it one step just a little bit further out, literally on the label, the general shape of the label is meant to evoke in a lot of the families in our area that immigrated from the Palatinate region, Switzerland, Germany, France area, the borders, mostly what is now modern day Germany. They had the family Bibles, and in the margins of the Bible, they would keep the family history. Mm-hmm. So there's very few histories that are less personal than the one that is, or more personal rather, than ones that are written in the margins of the family Bible and passed down over generations. So many of these family Bibles would be sitting in the parlor of so many houses. So for us, that shape, just to start with, was meant to evoke so much of that family tradition and family sort of history to begin with. So that said, that united by purpose across time for us means so many things. First, with Dick and his start in the industry, Dick also learned from Charlie Beam. That legacy through Beam family, and then also through that site at the historic Michter's Distillery in Lebanon, just a few miles up the road from us. So much history. And for us, it's just so important to acknowledge the people that came before us. If they hadn't been so dedicated, so creative, so hardworking, there'd be no history for us to preserve. There'd be nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
So for us, it's very important to acknowledge those contributions that came before us. So not only the legacy of that distilling that in our area goes back to the mid to early 1700s, actually 1720s in some parts. And it was just a way of life. It was what you did to preserve the crop that you were thankful to have. That said, that particular label that you have also says Klein Farm on there.
Yes.
That Klein Farm has been in our family it's now being farmed by, I believe, the 10th generation. So it goes back to 1741 when an ancestor of ours was fortunate enough to receive the land grant from the Penn family. Really interesting history there. And the fact that we're blessed enough to have cousins that are still farming it today, that we're able to grow the Rosen Rye on, for us, is truly just, in many ways, a dream come true, and something that if we set out to do at some point, I don't know that the pieces sort of came together and found us as much as we found them. So it's truly been a labor of love, and to be able to be on that land when it's planted, when it's harvested, to go check on the rye. I always joke with my cousins that farm it that when I leave, they're laughing. They're like, "Oh yeah, there goes the town guy, who doesn't know anything about farming, who they let essentially play farming when I'm there."
Right.
But it's just for us, that connection literally to the land across time, to the traditions of the people that made it. And then physically in our distillery, we've got a platform that supports our thumper that's made of brick. And that brick was actually from a distillery that goes back, again, to the mid 1700s in our town. That was the Single Sisters. Moravians founded the town of Lidditz, very religious folks. It may seem sort of contradictory that religious folks would have a distillery in town operated by some folks in the church, but at that time, that was the way you preserved the crop you were thankful to have been able to harvest. So that said, those bricks actually support the thumper in the distillery. So every drop of whiskey we produce is literally supported by the past. And then in the front of our tasting room, our back bar is also made with those same bricks. So everything we serve is also supported by that. So for us, it's both a physical and sort of emotional reminder of what we're doing and why we do it. There are definitely days where you're tired, you're hot, you're sweaty. We were talking about it before. I mean, I was saying to Alan the other day, it was about 100 degrees on top of the platform when we were distilling, and you could cut corners, you could do things that no one's going to know for years because it's going to go into a barrel.
Right.
So, but that said, you start to think about Dick Stoll, you start to think about these other generations of people, and I don't want to be known as the one that ruined that legacy or that started to cut those corners. So I think in that way, there's just amazing social pressure with a legacy like that to do the right thing and to keep it honest and keep it good, if for no other reason than to not let those people down. I mean, there's so many other reasons to do so, but
right, because across time goes both ways. I mean, it goes back to the 1700s that you've referenced, but it also goes towards what's in the future, and not just the 2, 3, 4 years that the whiskey you're distilling that day it sits in the barrel, but beyond that, when you're carrying this down to future generations.
And that's a great point. And for us, we do really try and think that way, that these barrels that we're laying down now will be opened in a different world, a future world. It'll be opened by people. And we start to get really geeky and really excited at the same time talking about those things, in that ideally we're creating what some people refer to as liminal spaces or liminal moments, where you're straddling two moments in time. So it's the past and the future sort of bound by the present. And for us, that's such an important motif and idea throughout the whiskey. So much of the projects we're working on for the future in anticipation of the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the birth of the country are revisiting past traditions that some folks haven't experimented with a little while. So to be able to bring those flavors and flavor traditions back to people, what an exciting way to be able to unite them with previous generations.
Right.
We talk so much with other history nerds about when a lot of people imagine the past, it exists in black and white, and it's not their fault. The few images we have are in black and white, and then you're almost trained to think, well, again, the past was a simpler time. It was an easier time. But to be able to bridge that time and create those liminal moments through flavor with some of these people, and then as a producer to be able to bridge some of that time as you're recreating some of these recipes or reinterpreting some of the recipes and production methods is truly just such a labor of love and a discovery process as well.
Yeah. You talked about the 250th anniversary of the country, and the practices that you're doing today are in many ways the same as what they were 250 years ago. I thought, wouldn't it be awesome if just the 250th anniversary of our nation, there was a revival of the values of our founders?
Oh man, that's a whole nother, not only podcast, but series of podcasts that are, but I think in so many ways, the values of the distillers and the farmers are things that I know for us are incredibly humbling and are lessons that we do really try to remind people of. Where I don't know about you, but if somebody said to me that I needed to go turn up in the town square in a couple weeks with my own weapon and fight against one of the most advanced militaries in the world.
Right.
Oh, and P.S., we don't really know what we're doing and we're not sure about whatever. Oh, and if they catch us, yeah, we're all done for.
Right.
I'm not hearing the good part in any of that. So again, for these people, and that's something we talk to folks about a lot, where for my ancestors to come over, nobody flees a country to come to a wooded, to come to the wilderness, to hand hew beams, logs, to have to build your own shelter. In many cases, they built the barn first, which, can you imagine having that conversation with your wife where it's like, no, we're going to build a barn. The cows, the few livestock we have will be fine.
Right.
We'll be sleeping next to them. Eventually, we'll build the house. I would, I'm sure, be sleeping outside the barn while my wife explained to me why I needed to work on the house.
Yeah, I don't know that would translate too well to 2025. But.
Maybe it sounded better in German at the time, or the Low German they were sort of speaking.
It all depends on what you're trying to get away from, I guess.
And that's it. I mean, and so for those people to flee to come here and have the opportunity to own land was truly, talk about the American dream, where you have the opportunity for some money to be able to work really hard and improve your lot based on how hard you work. But then so they got the farm in 1741. 30 years later, someone comes to you and goes, how you have the best thing you ever had going? Here's the thing. We're going to fight against those guys. So one of two things. You can either join us, and if we lose, you're out. You lost everything. Or you could join us, and then or you don't join us, we win. We're going to take away your farm anyway. So basically, they had no choice but to, in some way, join in. And what's fascinating is there's a broadside locally, and I apologize, I'm getting off topic.
No, it's okay. That's on me.
No. There's a broadside locally where they said, basically, Franklin very cleverly said to the local pacifists, we understand you're pacifists, but we would hate to win this revolution, which it looks like we're going to, and have your fellow countrymen, we know better, but they may think that you're sympathizers with the crown. So for your own safety, you really should join the war effort, or we can't really guarantee what's going to happen here. So it's sort of like a mafia, like, well, if your business should burn down, we can't. So yeah, really fascinating history though, in the area.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd hate it if something bad happened to that barn you and your wife are sleeping outside of.
That's exactly it. There's a lot of hay. It gets very dry with, so ultimately there was a military hospital, in the area, which was
Yeah.
sort of their concession. But yeah, and so I apologize for getting off topic, but
No,
the
that's
one
fine.
thing
It's good.
that Alan and I talk about so often, and our other collaborators, people like Paul Menta, is just that
Mhm.
the kinship that we share with these other distillers is that they're doing the best they can with the best ingredients that they can source
Mhm.
and trying to make something that is really going to make people take notice. Because I think at the end of the day, much like now and then, there wasn't a ton of marketing back then. There's obviously an inordinate amount of marketing now. But the best way to get your product into more hands is to just make a really good product.
Yeah.
It sounds silly, but it's amazing how much those guys really embrace innovation and how they really were always looking for new and better ways to do things, and sometimes to the detriment of the customer, but in many ways creating really efficient ways of producing whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of whiskey, let's talk about some whiskey. Um, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to try uh, this rye that I have of yours. It
Oh,
is
fantastic.
not the Rosen Rye. It is aged 12 months. So what grain is going into this?
So that is a blend of Danko and Brazetto rye. That one was sourced locally. It's a farm, small valley. They actually have a mill there as well. Small family-run farm and mill. The mash bill on that one is 60% rye, 30% corn, and 10% malt. The
Mhm.
corn in there comes from the Klein farm that we were just
Oh,
discussing,
okay.
and then 10% malt.
Yeah.
So for that release, that is our standard release. That's our Pennsylvania rye.
Mhm.
As I was mentioning right before we got rolling, I'll go ahead and send you a sample. We've got our standard Pennsylvania rye now is up closer to 3 years. It's really the one thing that we've noticed with the rye as it gets older. Obviously, the flavors get a little bit more intense in terms of
Mhm.
the barrel character. The grain starts to fade slightly. It's still very present at the 3 year mark, but with that also increased viscosity, just
Mhm.
a little bit more thickness in the mouthfeel. What we really like about the 12 month that you're drinking is just the vibrancy of the grain.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of folks that were really kind of surprised that it was the age that it was, just given the sort of balance between barrel age characteristics
Mhm.
and still having the grain come through. I think with rye, it's still pretty fascinating how we still get folks all the time that we're the first rye they've ever tried. So it's just so fascinating. One of the things that we talk about to so many people is whether you love our rye or hate it, you can't. It's a peek into the category, but it's certainly not a definition for the category. Even
Fair
within
enough.
Pennsylvania, there's so
Mhm.
many different styles of rye,
Yeah.
and in many ways, we're more of an Eastern Pennsylvania style rye, which is in many ways almost more similar to a Maryland style rye, which,
Mhm.
not to start any controversy, but I think a lot of people would agree a bunch of the Maryland rye was produced in Pennsylvania and just
Mhm.
happened to be sold
Yeah.
in Maryland.
You're going to start a gang war here.
Oh, I know exactly. No, and again, no disrespect to our friends at Sagamore. They are doing amazing stuff. There's amazing Maryland style rye, and I guess just for the folks out there that aren't sure what I mean when I say Eastern
Mhm.
Pennsylvania or Maryland style, I just mean that there is a corn component to it.
Mhm.
And I think for us, the corn component. Speaking of starting wars, I've received messages from people that said they really like what we're doing, but it's really a shame that we ruined our rye by including any corn in there. So I just cry myself to sleep at night thinking about those. But with that, the reason there is corn in our rye is, so there's several reasons, but the two main reasons is historically producers in our area definitely used corn. And also with Dick Stoll and his tradition and what he was taught, it's very similar to the mash bill that he did run at the historic Michter's with Charlie Beam. And with that said, his philosophy, which I'm sure was influenced in some way by Charlie as well, was that you can only get so much rye flavor in something before it starts to diminish. In the same way that with an IPA, it can only get so hoppy before the bitterness is imperceptible. With the rye and the corn, the idea being that the sweetness of the corn actually informs some of the spice of the rye. So that in the same way when you make a chocolate cake, you can only get so much cocoa note in there. But if you add a little bit of coffee to the recipe, you're adding the coffee notes, but to your mouth, it reads like a deeper chocolate flavor.
Right.
So that was sort of the philosophy in there. And it's very similar to a pre-prohibition Sam Thompson rye mash bill that they would have been running up at the Schaeferstown site.
Okay. This is excellent, and I know the Rosen Rye gets the headlines, and for good reason. But don't sleep on the standard rye. This is great. I mean, it's got some earthiness, leather to it, vanilla, a little bit of cinnamon and mint on the nose. The mint kind of sneaks in at the end of it for me. Some butterscotch, a little bit of orange, and I just think it's very good, very easy to drink, and for aging 12 months and 90 proof to pack that much flavor, that's something else.
Thank you very much. Well, and one of the things that I do think helps our whiskey drink a little bit older at a younger age, and I guess there's two sort of basic production philosophies, which is that you have your secrets, and then there's we'll share what we're all on the journey together. We'll share. We're more on we're all on the journey together. We'll share. So for us, we're a big believer in air dried cooperage whenever possible. So we've been working with the folks at Zach Cooperage to get air dried staves, and I know there's sort of the old adage in Kentucky that it takes 6 months to get sort of the wood into the whiskey, and then it takes a few years then to get the tannins out of it. And as so many of us have talked about in Kentucky as well, that why put those tannins in if ultimately you don't want to be able, you don't want to drink them. So it's definitely sometimes a challenge to be able to source the air seasoned cooperage just with demand, but it seems like that'll be a little bit easier coming up as there's some changes in the market.
Yeah. Is everything you use from a cooperage standpoint new oak, or do you use some used barrels as well?
So depending on the product, we do use some of our rye barrels and some of our bourbon barrels. Again, we've got an apple brandy that we do both in bourbon and rye barrels. We've got a rye that we do as a port cask finish, a rum cask finish, and a sherry cask finish, which I embarrassingly fought my wife over and have happily eaten my words in that with the sherry butt being bigger, obviously you can get more than a barrel in there. I only put half a barrel in there because I was convinced that nobody was going to want to buy that. And my exact words to her were, it will be good, but people think of sherry as an old lady's drink, particularly in our area, and no one is going to really be interested in trying it. I don't think it's worth dedicating a full barrel to. And she was so happy to point out that I was wrong on that. So, that's one for her, that's, 10,000 for not reverse the numbers and that would be accurate, but no,
you count her wins, you don't count her losses. I know I've been married long enough. I know how to keep score.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny with some of the cask finish stuff because I've heard people say quite a bit online, well, you don't buy cask finish stuff because they're just taking whiskey they couldn't sell otherwise and they're sticking it in other barrels.
Mhm.
And I I can't vouch for industry wide what happens, but I know for us, we're very blessed with the column and the thumper to have a fairly consistent output on
Mhm.
individual mash bills. It does vary somewhat, and then certainly coming out of the barrel can vary wildly.
Yeah.
But for us, we're able to, with the cast finishes, to us, the idea is more, and I know in discussing with Dick, it's more the notes we can coax out of the rye. So for us, just the ability to show the rye in different sort of settings or
Sure.
different flavor profiles. And I think particularly with rye, because people are so new to the category, it's such an interesting thing to be able to do where for a lot of folks, we sell our white rye, or we offer our
Mhm.
rye in a tasting, which some folks approach very cautiously and then ask us, oh, well, we didn't know you made moonshine. And it very respectfully to the moonshiners, we're not as cool as that. This is not this is made inside and legally. It does not have the cachet of moonshine.
You're going to pay sales tax on this.
That's exactly
Right.
it. Which to a bunch of the folks, it's like wah wah wah. They're very. They would have been much happier to hear that we distilled it illegally in the back.
Mhm.
But that said, for us, the reason that we offer that is the chance to see what it's like before there's any barrel influence. And I
Mhm.
think for so many folks, it's important with a new product category to them, just so that it's almost like a Rosetta Stone. If you know what it's like unaged,
Right.
then you have the opportunity to see what the barrel characteristic is like. Then with the barrels, that's the Cooper that we're using, the particular barrels that went into that dump with our particular mash bill. Then with the barrel finishes, I think it gives folks a chance, almost like pairing wine with different foods, just to see what you
Mhm.
can coax out of that mash bill. So I
Right.
think for a lot of folks, it's part of the journey, and then also exciting to see how some of the Scotch drinkers gravitate towards cask finish,
Right.
only because that's much more familiar to the world that they exist in.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you posted a story about your great great grandfather versus a rat. You want to share that story?
And again, one of those things that you couldn't make up if you wanted to. And why would you want to really? So I'm incredibly blessed to live in a small town that my family's been in again since prior to 1741. The farm started in 1741. So
Mhm.
I've always been raised that, look, people know who you are, act accordingly. We've made
Right.
it this far without getting kicked out of town. Don't be the generation that
Right.
gets ridden out on a rail. So in our town paper, they have a small section called "Out of the Past." And 100 years ago, as of last week, my great great grandfather, not the side that had the farm, he was a delivery driver for a bread company. So he horse drawn wagon, and apparently there was a rat that they speculate had been drinking moonshine. How they speculated that, other than the rat seemed fearless, apparently the writer either took liberties or there was a lot of moonshine laying around at the time.
Okay.
Um, so apparently he killed the drunken rat with the whip, and it made the paper. And the great thing was, I looked because they had a morning and evening edition paper. That was booked. They said at approximately 7 a.m. So again, you're a bread delivery guy. Your day starts early, but you did your bread route. You killed a rat with a whip. What do you do after that? I mean, that's a pretty full day. I
You,
mean,
you take that rat's moonshine and you kill the day.
you know what I mean? I think you just call it done, and they carry you on their shoulders to the town bar, and 100 years later, your smart aleck great great grandson is talking about you on a podcast.
That's great. That's
Oh man.
a wonderful story. Let's talk a little music for a second. When you're on the last time, you mentioned that your first two albums were um, U2's Joshua Tree,
Yep.
which I have over here, and Beach Boys' Greatest Hits. I don't have Beach Boys' Greatest Hits over here. I've got the Surfer Girl album, but I didn't know which Greatest Hits album it was. There's Endless Summer, which is the one I had back in the day, and then there's Greatest Hits, and then wait a minute, another Greatest Hits. Oh wait, the Best of the Beach Boys, and Beach Boys' Greatest Hits, and the Best of the Beach Boys again. They apparently loved their compilation albums. Were any of those six Beach Boys' Greatest Hits albums the one that you had?
No, I think I had some. Those were, I'm sure, way cooler. I had like the Camelot Records, like cobbled together one that was, I'm
Okay.
sure, licensed way later and didn't quite have the cool album art that those did. But to my young ears, it was like, oh wait, I can get two albums and not just one. Oh yeah, I'll get the two
Oh,
albums with the.
sure, sure.
But and the amazing thing with somebody like the Beach Boys, just the we talk about this with whiskey quite a bit and with music, where something that truly young children can enjoy, not the whiskey, the music.
Right.
But it doesn't really take a background in music to enjoy the Beach Boys. All you have to do is be human,
Mhm.
and you can relate to what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Or you could really dig in with some of those Brian Wilson songs and get so deep and so heavy that again, it's fun that to have things where you can truly enjoy them on a surface level or geek out really hard over the same thing.
Yeah. Uh, Brian Wilson passed away a few weeks ago. So there's been a lot of people talking about the Beach Boys and their music, and I remember that was one of your first albums. What any particular favorites from their catalog?
Man, for the Beach Boys, so as a surfer, I mean, Surfing USA is one of those where you just can't help.
Where do you surf in Eastern Pennsylvania?
It's so painful. It's so I go to Jersey is the closest beach to us.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because the start of every summer, the New York Post has to run an article because they've tagged these sharks, and they have to let people know either at the start of Shark Week or this one was the 50th anniversary of Jaws that there is a shark in the ocean. And the headline reads like 10-foot great white off of busiest beaches in mid-Atlantic, or however the headline reads. And then you read the article and you scroll down, and how far would you say a shark would have to be to the beach to merit even mention in a newspaper?
Like, I don't know, a couple 100 feet.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I'll give you 10 miles. 40 miles.
40 miles.
40
Okay.
miles. So you'd have me believe there's a shark in the ocean within a 40 miles of the beach? I've heard everything now.
Well,
It's very so no, I thought that was pretty fantastic. And again, with also then as a musician, well, someone who enjoys playing music, I wouldn't say I'm a musician. Geeking out to the Pet Sounds album, and I mean, talking deep Brian Wilson sort of. I feel like talk about somebody who was so far ahead of their time and somebody who was doing things that I think people will be discovering and rediscovering for generations. And I'm hardly going out on a limb by saying that. Another hot tip: these kids called the Beatles might be good too someday.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, it's we'll see.
They might make it.
Yeah, exactly. If they can, fingers crossed. No, but it's just always so fascinating to me. One of the posts that was up in one of the forums recently was just showing there were like 7 or 8 key changes in some of the Beach Boys songs where it's just it's very rare that someone can define the sound of a generation or define the sound of a movement or define the sound of someone's youth, but you constantly hear people who I respect as musicians talking about the first time they heard some of those songs on the radio and just pulling over and just having to just process what they heard, which is pretty amazing. For when was the last time in recent memory that an act that was as popular as the Beach Boys were and appealed to the masses as much as they did, also contained so much depth?
Yeah, there's a lot of critical acclaim for the Beach Boys music, especially Pet Sounds, and then you look at they've got 6 greatest hits albums that I shared tonight, and it wasn't even the one that you had. So
matched only by Credence in their output.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not a big Beach Boys fan, but I think that they certainly defined that. They defined that sound. They were it, and I saw a post the other day where they were asking some musicians, okay, what's the perfect song? And I think of the 3 or 4 of them, a couple said God Only Knows by the Beach Boys. So, yeah. So, what? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, and also, other than the Beatles, just I can't think of another group that was so saccharine and sweet, and then also through psychedelic sort of experimentation, really had their sound evolve so much, and really could make that work. Is really, I think, just another feather in their cap. I do have to say, for friends of mine, they're going to be listening to this and are going to say, "Well, I've never heard him play the Beach Boys once." I can't say that I'm constantly driving around listening to the Beach Boys. They just, in terms of my childhood, and certainly someone who's influenced so many of the acts that I have enjoyed throughout my life, they're certainly up there for me.
Yeah. So, well, if you're going to play the Beach Boys, we're in the time of the year that you should be playing the Beach Boys as we get into summer. I think that the sound of the Beach Boys is as synonymous with summer as anybody else. Are there any other songs or artists or albums that when you say, okay, what's a great summer song, or what would make a great summer playlist? Anything come to mind?
So there's so many, and I'm so guilty. The way some people are always into Christmas, and to them they're always happy to listen to Christmas carols. I'm sort of a perpetual summer person. My wife and daughter will happily tell you that if I could, I would constantly be in summer. So that for me is a question that hits very close to home. I think ranging, and as my music tastes are fairly eclectic, the first song that comes to mind when I think of summer, and I know it's cliche, but Manfred Mann, Summer in the City, is just, having lived in New York City, I try to explain to my daughter that before air conditioning was as prevalent as it was, I understand why murder rates went up in the city. It's hot, and there's so many people so close to you, and there's no relief. And that song to me captures just that grittiness and the heat of summer so much and so well. Yeah. And then to me, the sort of polar opposite, but so much fun, is just the Mungo Jerry Summertime. I mean, in the summertime, it's just such a fun song. And then it leads to sort of my generation, which is Sublime, and their song Summertime, which to me, then I can't help. And again, being from Southern California, Sublime to me is just such a summer sound. Yeah. Then my inner 70s child comes out, and I start thinking of, I believe it's Seals and Crofts, Summer Breeze.
Yes. Makes me feel fine.
Yeah. Yes. how could anything blowing through the chasm of your mind be bad? You know what I mean? I just feel like that's so for me, so many of those are just it's just the idea of being able to drive in the summertime in the evening with the windows down, good music on, or even
Hmm.
being out on the beach with friends, having good music on is just such a oh man, it truly warms my heart.
Yeah. The one of the ones, and this will show my age, but when I was a kid, first time we ever went to the beach, the song that you could not get away from was "Love Will Keep Us Together" by Captain and Tennille.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, the song is pretty terrible, but it's a great memory for me, and especially with my mom.
Uh,
Um,
well, and
so
so my problem is too, being the age I am, I grew up adjacent to a lot of really good music, but then there was also those 80s bands. So some music, I
mhm,
freely have to admit, I don't know if it's good or nostalgia on my part.
doesn't matter.
I, well, and that's the thing. I'm sure some of the, early Def Leppard, well, I guess it wasn't early Def Leppard, it was early to me, or
Right.
Poison, or some of the Motley Crue that, again, as a little kid or, 10-year-old, I look back on me singing those lyrics at 10 years of age to Dr. Feelgood or whatever, where I'm like, oh, that was interesting. But
Yeah.
that said, some of those songs just resonate only because they remind you of that time and that place,
Yeah.
those liminal moments that we talked about before.
Yeah. There was had a band on as a guest a while back, and as I listened to their music, I thought, I get a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and I said, there's some Def Leppard in there, and I'm thinking, I hope they're not offended by that. And then I thought, wait a minute, these guys made billions of dollars selling out gigantic arenas around the world. If you're offended by being compared to Def Leppard, I don't know what to do for you.
That's exactly it. Yeah. No, it's so true. What and I think with so much of that stuff, it's just amazing I can tell you with certain songs the first, just like you did, where I was the first time I heard it, or what
Mhm.
was happening the first time I heard it. And it's just, I don't have that with food necessarily, or with certain smells, or certain,
Hmm.
I guess maybe certain smells are
Yeah.
whiskey related stuff, but it's just amazing how music really has that power to transport you back to that place
Hmm.
or time where you first heard it, and then it becomes almost inexorably intertwined
Hmm.
with for better or worse too.
Right. United by purpose across time.
That's exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Some songs are like the Kahlua of songs for
Right.
me, where if I never had them again, I'd be okay with that. But
Yeah. The Huey Lewis, "Power of Love." I mean, that was uh, the hit of that summer, and you couldn't get away from it. And I hear it, and I, I go back to group of friends I was running around with, and you know, it's good.
yeah, no, it's funny how some of that stuff too. Again, my wife is 7 years older than I am, so some of the songs that I will have that nostalgia for, she'll look at me like, "What?" And then she's like, "Oh, you were 11 at the time. That makes perfect sense. Now I get the sure playing with He-Man, listening to that makes perfect sense."
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All right. Well, that was part one of conversation with Erik. Again, just a sweetheart of a guy, and always very generous with his time and with his knowledge. And he's doing just fantastic things to resurrect the reputation and the history of Pennsylvania whiskey, specifically the Rosen Rye. So, hope you enjoyed that. Be sure to tune in next week to catch part two of that conversation. It is a blast, I promise. Again, you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. You like Instagram? I'm there posting cool photos of awesome whiskeys that I'm drinking, or sharing with you information about bands that I love, you love, we all love. And we're also on Facebook. We have a Facebook page where we post all of our shows, including this one. And we have a Facebook group where we can share things that you may be seeing in the music world or the whiskey world. And I will do the same. And we invite you to join us. So until next time, thanks for tuning in. Tell your friends and neighbors good night.